Hey guys, welcome back. Is that time of year again where I show off my CD collection and show you guys what I currently have and what I have gotten throughout this year. As you guys may know, if you have been watching me for some time, I typically do this twice a year, once towards the beginning of the year, sometime in mid to late January, early February, then again towards late November, early December. So here we are with the end of the year with one of these videos. And yeah, I've decided to go back to a video format as I find this a little bit easier to do than live stream. And just you guys see me trying to go back and forth, pulling albums I currently have off this little rack I have and whatnot. I personally didn't mind doing the live streams, but at times I kind of felt it was awkward just because of that movement. I did, however, enjoy chatting with you guys during those live streams, just talking about these albums, these artists, and whoever else you guys want to talk about along the way. And yeah, I'll be splitting this video off into two parts, like I've always done. So it's not an overly long video, like half an hour in length or so. But yeah, I will be splitting off into two parts, and this one will contain all artists whose names start anywhere between A through N. So this will probably be the shortest one out of this whole video that you guys are watching, but here we are with the A's. Here we go with them. First one is Stiff Upper Lip by AC/DC. I didn't think this was too terrible of an album, but certainly not one of their best albums to date. Next up, I have A Little South of Sanity by Aerosmith. It is a live album. I feel it was a decent live album to say nonetheless. And lastly, for these, I have Who I Am by Alan Jackson. I feel it was a solid album. Hopping into the B's now. First one is Millennium by the Backstreet Boys. I feel it is a solid album and an enjoyable one as well. Next, I have BTR by Big Time Rush. This is the UK edition and contains a couple of bonus tracks, and overall I feel it is an enjoyable album, enjoyable debut album as well, as their debut album. Next up, I have Elevate by Big Time Rush. Honestly, not a bad album. It does have a couple of tracks I do personally enjoy, but still a solid album. And to finish them off, I have 24/7. This is the deluxe edition. Solid album. And, an enjoyable album for their third and final stereo album currently. I see they have been releasing some new music over the past year or two now. I'm kind of hoping that they do release a new studio album here soon. Next up, I have Happier Than Ever by Billie Eilish. I feel this is an enjoyable album overall. Next, I have Billy Joel, the Complete Collections, the Complete Hits Collection. I mispronounced that. Contains a ton of his hits from 73 through 97, and I feel it is enjoyable overall. Next up, I have The Best of Billy Ray Cyrus. Cover to Cover by Billy Ray Cyrus contains some of his more popular and well-known tracks. I thought was an enjoyable album. Next, I have Legend by Bob Marley and Wailers. It contains some of their greatest hits, and it is an enjoyable album to say nonetheless. Next up, Greatest Hits by Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. Again, another decent album in my opinion. Now, this one right here, Bruno Mars's Unorthodox Jukebox. I've said multiple times here on the channel why I'm missing that plastic cover, but overall it is a great album, great tracks, enjoyable from start to finish. I honestly can't believe that the album is 10 years old now. Next I have Britney by Britney Spears, another decent album, and that turned 20 last year in 2021. Now to finish off the B's, I have Oops, I Did It Again by Britney Spears, another enjoyable album. So here we are with the C's. The first one is Let's Talk About Love by Celine Dion. I feel it is a enjoyable album, a great album to this day, and probably one of my favorites that I do own in my collection. Next is Jackpot by Chingy. Overall, not a bad rap album coming from the 2000s. Next I have A Fan of a Fan, the album, Deluxe Edition by Chris Brown and Tyga. It did have some enjoyable tracks, say nonetheless. Next up I have My Own Prison by Creed. Wouldn't say it was a horrible album, say nonetheless. And lastly, I have Music of the Spheres by Coldplay. There's a couple of tracks I do enjoy off the album, but honestly, it isn't one of my favorite Coldplay albums to date. Now, moving on to the D's, I have Break the Spell, Deluxe Edition by Daughtry. Overall, not too terrible of an album. I felt it was enjoyable all the way through. Next up, Daughtry's self-named album. I believe this album turned 15 this year. Yeah, and I'll have to make sure I write down every single anniversary of each album for this year that celebrated like 5, 10, 15, so on and so forth. Next up, I have No Angel by Ditto. It did have some enjoyable tracks and elements. Lastly, I have David Cook's self-named album. Now, onto the E's. This looks like another quick one for you guys. So, I have Plus by Ed Sheeran. Personally, one of my favorites of his, and I'd say his best to date, alongside his second studio album, Multiply. I also have his album equals not too bad of an album. There are some enjoyable tracks throughout the album, but personally not one of my favorites. As there are still some enjoyable tracks on it. Lastly, I have Music to Be Murdered By, Side B by Eminem. I have no albums by any artist whose name starts with the letter F, so I'm going to be hopping into the G's now. So I have Double Live by Garth Brooks. Haven't had a chance to listen to the album, but Garth Brooks, I feel he is a decent artist, to say nonetheless. Next up, I have Saint Elsewhere by Gnarls Barkley. Overall, it is a decent album. It has some enjoyable tracks as well. Lastly, I have the Christmas album by the Glee cast. Haven't been much of a fan of Glee, but I honestly should check the album out, as this is one of the few albums I was just given. So I only have one album by an artist whose name starts with an H, and it is Snowden by Hanson. I didn't feel it was a terrible holiday album. So now The Eyes, which is purely one artist, but I'm just gonna hop into it anyways. So I have Evolve by Imagine Dragons. This album turned 5 earlier this year, and I wouldn't say it was a bad album. Certainly not one of their best, but it is somewhat of a decent album nonetheless. Then I have Mercury Act 1 by Imagine Dragons. I feel it was an enjoyable album and much better than their 2018 release, Origins. Now, I have Mercury Acts 1 and 2 by Imagine Dragons, which honestly sucks because, unfortunately, Act 2, for some reason, wasn't being sold separately, so I had to buy both acts bundled together. Next up, I have Night Visions, the deluxe edition by Imagine Dragons. That album turned 10 this year. Their debut studio album is now 10 years old, and I feel it is an enjoyable album still to this day. Lastly, I have Smoke and Mirrors, the deluxe edition by Imagine Dragons. I am now moving on to the J's. So I have 9 by Jason Aldean. Not one of my favorite albums of his, but it did have some enjoyable tracks. Next I have Talk Dirty by Jason Derulo. Again, not one of my favorite albums of his. There are a couple of tracks I personally do enjoy, but, honestly, not one of my favorite albums of his, with its overall theme and some of the lyrics throughout the album. Next I have Happiness Begins by Jonas Brothers. Honestly, a great comeback album from them, and quite enjoyable to say nonetheless. Next I have Purpose by Justin Bieber, one of his more enjoyable albums to date. Next I have Justice by Justin Bieber. This is the Target edition, which contains one bonus track. Overall, an enjoyable album and great exclusive track. Next, I have Justice, the Walmart edition. Again, same Justin Bieber album, but a different exclusive track than the Target edition, which is kind of why I ended up getting both albums, mainly just for the exclusive track on both of them. But overall, it's an enjoyable album. Then I have Future Sex, Low Sounds by Justin Timberlake. And closing us out with the J's, I have the 2020 Experience, the complete collection by Justin Timberlake. I feel both are enjoyable albums. Now, my keys, they're gonna be short as well, but here I have Graduation by Kanye West. The album turned 15 this year. It is such a great album and one of my personal favorites of his. I had that album burned on a disc. Next up, I have Donda by Kanye West. Such an enjoyable album. And lastly, I have Welcome to the Fishbowl by Kenny Chesney. I feel it was a decent album. Now, onto the L's. Yet another short one we're going to be getting for this part of the video. So I have Born This Way Special Edition by Lady Gaga. It is a couple of bonus tracks, mainly consisting of remixes. Overall, I didn't feel it was too terrible of an album. Next up, I have Norman fucking Rockwell by Lana Del Rey. Overall, I feel it was an enjoyable album. Then I have Brightside by the Lumineers. This is their latest album they released earlier this year. I feel it was an enjoyable album for only being 9 tracks and like 35 minutes or so in length. And lastly, for L's, I have 20th Century Masters by Leonard Skinner. Contains some of their greatest hits, and overall, I feel it was a greatest hits album. Onto the M's. First one is Malcolm Moore and Ryan Lewis's The Heist. This album turned 10 this year, and I feel it is such a great and enjoyable album. It has so many great qualities to it. Personally, one of my favorite albums from the 2010s. Next up is Matchbox 20's Yourself or Someone Like You. It was a pretty enjoyable album to say nonetheless. Next up, I have Jordy by Maroon 5. Honestly, one of the few albums I regret purchasing, mainly because I'm not the biggest fan of this album, as it is so generic, so bland, so, soulless, so weak. Honestly, one of their worst albums to date. Next, I have Overexposed by Maroon 5. This album here turned 10 earlier this year, and I feel that is their last greatest album to date that I'll actually listen to. Next up, I have Number Ones by Michael Jackson. Another greatest hits album that I do own, and I feel it is an enjoyable album. Lastly, I'm going to finish off the M's with Thriller by Michael Jackson. This album recently turned 40 years old on November 30th. Such a great album, still to this day, 40 years later. So many great tracks, even though it's only 9 tracks in length, and I see there is a 40th edition to this album that was recently released. I want to check the album out, and I see there are physical copies of the album, which I may end up purchasing a copy of. So, closing out this video, here I have the ends. First one I have is All the Right Reasons by Nickelback. I feel it is an enjoyable album, and to me, one of their best albums to date. I do enjoy their albums from the late 90s, early 2000s. I find all of that stuff to be enjoyable. And lastly, I have No Strings Attached by NSYNC. Pretty enjoyable pop album, and honestly one of my favorite albums of the year. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. The next video will contain the rest of the albums I own, as again I'm going to be splitting this into 2 separate videos, mainly for timing purposes. So yeah, it'll be practically all artists from O to Z and any numbers. So I will see you all in the next video.